Does anybody else ever get that feeling where you just really want to set up a new notebook, but you kind of don't feel like you have any reason to do that? Enabler Jess here to tell you there are plenty of reasons to set up a new notebook, and today we're going to look at approximately 100 of them. Disclaimer, I do not encourage you to set up all of these notebooks, but if you have a blank journal and you're not too sure what to do with it, this list will be helpful for you. I'm setting this one up in my long-term collections journal so that I always have a handy reference of different ideas of what to do with a blank notebook. If you wanted to grab yourself a copy of this list, I do have it available as a printable, which is linked in the description box below. I've tried to break these ones down into categories just so it's a little bit more organized, and the first category we have is productivity and organization. Of course, given the content on my channel, it would be very amiss of me to not mention that you can of course use a blank journal to make a bullet journal. This is what the majority of my notebooks are destined to do, so if you're not already using one, that could be a good use for your blank notebook. Our second idea is a yearly collections journal, and this is one that I started myself this year. It's effectively a place to put in any collections that I'm going to use for the entire of the year. And I'll use this one year upon year for probably the next at least 5 years to set up those yearly collections. So things like my year-long trackers, things like my year-long goals lists, that kind of stuff. Our third idea is the journal we're working in here, which is a long-term collections journal. These are for references and collections that are going to be needed for longer than just the life of one of my regular journals, which is typically 6 months. I use this as a catch-all for things like my wish list, my theme ideas, my swatch pages, and of course the list we're writing here. On to our next category, we have the very related references category. So this is setting up your notebook as a themed reference space. Our first idea is an everyday reference book. So a place for you to keep things like often used contacts, if there are particular brands of things that you like to buy, document specifications, really any kind of reference that you'd need to use fairly often. Our next idea for this category is a perpetual calendar, or effectively a journal that you use to write down all of the happenings that happen at the same time each year. So this could be things like birthdays, anniversaries, holidays. Remember that there are some holidays that don't fall at the same time every year. Another type of reference you could make with your blank journal is using it as a swatch book. I personally keep my swatches in my long-term collections journal, but I know other people find it really helpful to have a dedicated swatch book for their materials. Our next idea is one that you don't necessarily see that much of anymore, but that's an address book. Of course, most people do keep these things on their phones or digitally now, but it can still be helpful to have a physical reference. Our ninth idea is a password prompt book, and I've worded it in this way because I don't really think it's a good idea to write your passwords down in a book that if you lose, somebody has all your passwords. But people do like to do things differently, so it could be helpful for some people. Our next category is a media category, and by this I mean TV shows, music, movies, all of that. Our first idea for this category is a quote book, so a catch-all space for the quotes that you have from these different sources. Those quotes could be done decoratively or just simply written in. Our next idea is one that you've probably seen before, and that's a reading journal. So a space to record notes about the things you're reading, record your reading challenges, really just anything related to reading. Similarly, we also have a watching journal, which is the same kind of thing, but for things that you watch. So TV shows, movies, anime, etc. We also have the very related gaming journal, which is a space to hold all of your collections related to gaming. Another idea is to use your blank notebook as a poem book, either for poems that you personally write or poems that speak to you that were written by other people. Another idea for your blank notebook is using it as a space to record lyrics that you like. Maybe lyrics that fill you with different types of emotions, or that resonate with you in some way. Related to our reading, watching and gaming journals, you could also have a music journal. In particular, I've seen quite a few people do K-pop journals. So setting up layouts related to different songs or albums from their favorite artists. Of course, another type of media is podcasts. So you could have a journal dedicated to either one podcast that you're listening to or all of the ones you're listening to. Depending on the type of podcasts you listen to, that could be just trackers of what episodes you have and haven't listened to, or this could involve journaling and reflecting on those. On to our next category, we have ways that you can use your blank notebook, which are related to hobbies and craft. Our first idea for this one is as a project planner, in particular a project related to your hobby or craft. So a space to record the series of steps that need to be taken, your progress towards this, that kind of stuff. Another way that you can use a blank notebook is as a sketchbook. This may be more suitable if your notebook has blank pages, and by blank I mean not dot grid, not lined, that kind of thing. But of course, do not let that stop you. You could also use your blank notebook as a scrapbook, whether that be in the traditional sense of the word scrapbook, like photos, journaling, memorabilia bits, or whether that be a literal place for scraps. One thing that I've quite enjoyed seeing was somebody making a washi tape graveyard for all of the little offcuts of washi tape that they had from any time they actually used washi tape. Another idea is to use your notebook as a junk journal, whether that be a wreck this journal type junk journal, or the type where people use a bunch of different things like stickers and papers and do some collaging. You could also use your notebook as a space to record any finished pieces you have. So writing down notes about things like how long it took you to complete the project, what materials you used, who that project ended up going to, that kind of stuff. Something that I sure could use one of my notebooks for is as a place to do some lettering practice. So whether that be calligraphy style lettering or any other style. An idea that's hobby related in particular is using your notebook as a space to record your collection notes. And by this I mean things for collectors, not collections like bullet journal pages. So for instance, if you like to collect different types of tea, you might have different notes about which teas you did and didn't like, brewing notes, etc. On to our next category, and these are our ideas related to food. The first of which is a recipe journal. When I asked you guys over on Instagram what you might use a blank notebook for, this is one of the ones that came up a lot. I personally like to keep my recipes in a digital notebook on OneNote, just because I find it a little bit easier to search, but I can totally see the appeal of having a physical recipe journal full of all of your favourite recipes. Another idea is using your notebook for shopping lists, so possibly having a couple of reference pages for your master grocery list, and then putting in your daily or weekly shopping lists in there as well. You could also use your journal as a meal planner, with pages dedicated to what your favourite meals are for you and your family, and then planning out what you guys are going to be having for each of your meals so that you can also hopefully write a shopping list that doesn't leave off any items. Another food related idea we have is allergy tracking. Food allergies are pretty common, and if you're on a journey to find out which foods may be triggering an allergy response, recording that information in a journal could be really helpful. On to the next column and on to our next category. This one is for notebook ideas related to home and family, with our first notebook idea being a shared schedule. For this type of journal, you'd probably leave it in a place that all members of your household could reference and write in to say when they will or won't be around. For our next idea, this one is very much related to me, so it's things Vogel says, because honestly some of his one-liners are ridiculous. But for you, this could be things your parents say, things your partner says, things your kids say, etc. If you do have a partner or another significant person in your life, you could also dedicate a journal to your love story, whether that be romantic love or otherwise. This one would make for a really nice keepsake to look back on in years to come. One that is very much related to me is the idea of having a wedding planner. I've been meaning to start a wedding planner properly for years now, but considering I have no plans on getting married anytime soon, I haven't really started. I am still engaged, but yeah, no plans yet. Our next idea, again, won't be right for everybody, but if it's right for you, you could be using your blank notebook as a pregnancy journal. So either for trying to get pregnant or documenting your pregnancy, or both. You might want to dedicate your blank notebook to a pet or pets, so whether that be a memory keeping style thing or keeping on top of the kind of maintenance that goes around having a pet. Similarly, you might want to use your blank notebook for your kids instead. Again, whether that be in a memory keeping sense or in a general child maintenance sense. Appointments, schedules, etc. Our next idea is using your notebook as a holiday planner. So whether that be going away type holidays or travel related holidays, or if they could be celebrations that are a little closer to home. Up next, another idea that came up a lot in that Instagram poll was that of a gardening journal. So a space to plan out what you want to do in your garden, to write down things like when things are actually in season, when you should be planting and harvesting. Of course, this very much depends on the type of plants you keep, but it could be useful. Our next two ideas are certainly related to each other, but things that I consider different. The first one being a home project planner, and the second being a home maintenance planner. In my mind, projects are things related to changes or additions, whereas maintenance is more keeping up with the same. Of course, you can combine both ideas into the one journal, but you may also want to keep them separate if you wanted to have both. Our next category, and we've already touched on it a couple of times, is that of memory keeping ideas. As I said, I did try and organize these things into different sections, just to keep it a little more organized, but we do certainly have some overlap. Our first idea for this category though is just a general memory keeping journal. So memory keeping of anything and everything you want in whatever style you want. Our second idea for this one is a travel diary. So specifically targeted towards the memories you're making when you're away from home. Another idea that's a bit of fun is a 5-year journal. Some of these will have a daily prompt with 5 spaces, so 1 space for each of 5 years, where you can reflect on or answer that prompt. Whereas other ones will just get you to write in a little bit about what's happening that day on each subsequent year. Another idea, which was one that came through from that Instagram poll, was that of a camp journal. The person who suggested this one, I believe, is a camp director or a camp leader, but you could also totally have this one if you were still going on camps as a participant. Another way to use your blank notebook is to put in the daily headline for each day. You could either do this by picking one news outlet and writing down their headline, or pick a selection and write down the headlines across those for each day. This would be an interesting way to see what captured the world's attention on any given day in a period of time. You could use your blank notebook as a memorabilia book, so collecting things like ticket stubs, pamphlets, that kind of thing, and sticking them into the notebook. Or another idea for your memory keeping would be a 1-line-a-day style thing, where you write out 1 line or 2 lines each day, just about what happened in that day. You might want to use your empty notebook more as a photo album, though do remember to use acid-free adhesive so that these last as long as possible. Another idea, which might be for memory keeping or could just be for fun, is a daily doodle or scribble. In the theme of memory keeping, this could be related to your day, or if it was more just for fun, it could be of anything. So possibly following a doodle prompt sheet, or just whatever you feel like. Another idea related to memory keeping is a picture diary. So rather than a daily journal, which is a lot more writing heavy, doing this instead with pictures. This can also be a good way to see your progress towards something that might be easier to capture in photos rather than in words. Our next category is related to using that blank notebook to record your ideas, with the first style being as a brainstorming book. I personally have a notebook that I'm using as a dedicated brainstorming book, and it's nice to have a space that you can just be a little bit messy, a little bit free with your thoughts, just to get all your ideas down onto paper. If you wanted something a little more structured though, you could use your notebook as an ideas journal, whether they be ideas in general or ideas related to a specific thing. For instance, I keep several themed idea lists in my content planner. Our next category are ideas of ways to use a notebook that are related to learning. The first of these being a commonplace book. A commonplace book is effectively a space to compile knowledge. So it could be quotes, anecdotes, any observations, or things that you've learned from various sources. Rather than being themed for one field of study, it's effectively a catch-all. Our next idea is to have a student or study planner. And if you wanted ideas on what you could put in a notebook like that, I do have a separate video on student-related bullet journal spreads. Another idea is for those of you who might be learning a language, and you could dedicate your notebook to the study associated with that. On a related note, you could also use a notebook to just record words or vocab that you learned, whether that be for a new language or your mother tongue. You may also want to have a space to record the things that you want to learn. So for instance, the one I list here is songs to learn, but it could be any other skill as well. Another way that you can use a blank notebook is just for your study notes in general, whether those be school or university study notes, or any other kind of study. Moving on to the other side of our spread, our next category is related to goals, with our first idea being a goal planner. While you can buy pre-printed goal planners, you can of course use a blank journal to make your own. If you wanted some ideas of what you might include in that, I do also have a playlist of goal-related spread ideas. That one and any other related videos can be found in the description box. Another thing you can dedicate a journal to is using it for a life assessment space. So whether this be level 10 life or any other kind of style of assessment. This effectively just gives you a place to check in with how life is going. And if you use it repeatedly over a longer period of time, you can see how areas might improve or may start to need some more work. A style of goal setting that I really enjoy is the 101 things list, and I was very tempted this year to, instead of putting it in my yearly collections journal, set up another journal just for that list. In using a full notebook for your 101 things list, you could have one thing per page and use it as a way to record when you do that, maybe do some journaling, put in a picture as evidence of having completed it, or you could use it on a year after year basis. Similar to this, another goal-related idea we have is using your notebook for a bucket list. Again, you could just keep it in list format, or you could dedicate each page to a separate bucket list item. Our next idea is that of a routine planner, which could both be used for planning your routines and tracking them. This would be especially helpful for if you're looking to build new routines or looking to hold yourself accountable in some way. A similar idea is that of a habit building planner. So rather than thinking about routine-based habits, this one could be for other habits you're trying to build, with spaces on how you plan to execute that habit, how you intend to make it easier, and then also tracking when you completed it. Our next idea is that of a forward life planner. So a space to get intentional about the things you're doing at the moment and what that actually means for your future. Are you setting yourself up for success? Are the steps you're doing right now actually going to lead to the outcomes you want? Our next section is that related to spirituality. I don't consider myself to be a very spiritual person, but I know some of you guys are. So the ideas we have in this section are a general faith journal, a notebook dedicated to Bible journaling, a book of shadows, an astrology journal, a journal to record your daily tarot card readings, a prayer journal, or a moon journal. Obviously, this is just a selection of the different types of spirituality we have, so this list could have had a fair few more entries. Our next category after this, though, is health and wellness. The first two ideas we have in this category are a bit more general, but you could dedicate your empty notebook to a physical health journal, so thinking about the aspects of physical health, including sleep, hydration, exercise, food, that kind of stuff. Or you could have a mental health journal, so with spreads related to emotions, stress, anxiety, and other aspects. Getting a bit more specific though, you could dedicate the journal to a fitness planner, with planning pages, calendars, trackers, all related to your fitness and maintaining this or improving on it. A common health and wellness goal is that related to weight loss, so you might want to dedicate your notebook to that, using pages and trackers related to the things you're trying to do to lose weight, and then also keeping track of your progress. It might also be suitable to you to have a journal dedicated to illness, whether that be chronic illness or any other kind of illness. A place to keep track of things like symptoms, triggers, any information related to the illness. Keeping track of these things can also be really helpful for when you're talking to your doctors about it. So having them all in the one place might be helpful. Another idea that we were given from that Instagram poll was a CBT thought diary. And CBT stands for Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. The idea with having this thought diary is that it's a place for you to capture your negative thoughts and then process them, explore them, see which of your thoughts are unhelpful or invalid. Another idea is to use your notebook as a place to record your medical notes. So this could be medical notes just for you, or it might be for other members of your family. Again, having these all in one place can be helpful. Our next idea is that of an affirmations journal. So a place to write down statements and thoughts that will help you with your health and wellness. Another aspect of wellness that you might want to capture in an empty notebook is that of gratitude. So setting up things like gratitude logs or gratitude trackers as a way to record the things you're grateful for in your life. Our next idea is that of a dream journal. So while the pictured examples here are for sleep logs, you can of course do long form journaling about what your dreams actually involve. Some people also like to then analyze their dreams to see what hidden meaning they might have. Another idea is that of a therapy journal, so a place for you to work through any of the things that are related to therapy sessions you might be having. These could be activities that were prescribed by your therapist, or things that your therapist might have asked you to record so that you can make more progress with your sessions. Our next idea is that of unsent letters, and by this I mean letters that in theory you could have sent to people when you were feeling a certain way about something, but it wasn't necessarily going to have a positive outcome in sharing those thoughts in that way. So for instance, when you're angry at someone about something, and you want to process those thoughts without actually having to confront them head on. It doesn't just have to be about anger though, it can of course be for other emotions as well. Our next idea is that of a reflections journal. And the type of reflection, or what you're reflecting on, is very much up to you. I personally think that reflection is a super powerful tool, and I think that the act of actually writing out our reflections can be a lot more powerful than just thinking about them in our head. When you put it into a physical space like that, it kind of makes you confront them a bit more. The next idea for our health and wellness category is that of morning pages. The concept of this one came from the book The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, and in their original form these are 3 pages of longhand stream of consciousness writing, done first thing in the morning. So giving yourself a place to write whatever is on your mind, whether that be worries, concerns, thoughts, essentially anything. For our next category, these are ideas related to finances and purchasing, with the first idea in this category being that of a budget planner. So a place to keep track of your spending, your income, setting goals around savings, planning how much you intend to spend on things, and then analysing how much you actually spend on them. Another idea for your empty notebook is that you could use it as a wish list. So either a wish list just for yourself, or you could collect wish lists of other people that you commonly buy gifts for, whether that be birthdays, holidays, just because, etc. I find that having a wish list is really handy when it comes to a time when people would usually buy me a gift and they ask me what I want. It's usually kind of hard to think of that off the top of your head, but if I have a wish list, then I have a reference to refer to. The next idea is that of a charity journal. So recording the ways in which you're being charitable, planning out any charitable events or tasks that you want to do. Depending on the type of charity you're working with, you may also get feedback from the people that you're helping, and it could be nice to record that in your charity journal as well. The next idea is that of a subscriptions tracker. I don't know about you guys, but oftentimes I kind of forget the things that I'm subscribed to, and I'm not even subscribed to that many things. It's good to pay attention to 1, the number of things we're subscribing to, 2, the amount of monetary cost there is, and 3, are we actually getting enough benefit from that cost? On to our next column, and this category is a bit more niche, but that is all of our ideas related to book writing. The first idea for this one is using your empty journal as a space to record story ideas. This could include things like story starter prompts, or just ideas for stories that you want to write. Rather than just your ideas, you could also use your journal to complete your creative writing. Whether that be having the full journal for one story, or having multiple short stories in the one journal. Something that seems to be common in our book writing community is having a journal dedicated just to your notes about the story, or book writing notes. So keeping notes about the universe that you're trying to build in that story, about the plot, or about the characters. And some people even like to keep journals for the character profiles themselves. So looking at the skills and attributes of those characters. What are their character strengths? What are their weaknesses? What do they look like, and what kind of terminology could be used to describe them? What could also be useful to have and would make a good use of an empty notebook is using it as a writing planner. So when do you actually intend to sit down and write it? What kind of deadlines are you working with? How much do you want to have written by certain points in your timeline? When should your first draft and second draft be finished by? That kind of stuff. Our next category holds ideas related to work and careers. The first of which is just having a general work planner. For some people, it is certainly valuable having their work planner separated from their personal planner, whether that be because the information is sensitive or private, or could be requested to be seen or turned in to the people that you work with. Rather than just having a general work planner, you might want to be a little bit more specific about what that journal's being used for. So it could be used for project planning, so looking at the sequence of steps that need to be taken in order to complete specific projects, or you could have it as a work reference journal. So a place to record any references that you might need to use in order to do certain things for your job. For instance, if I had a work reference journal, I'd probably include things related to the tasks that I only have to do once a year. Because I don't have to do them as frequently, I often forget the sequence of steps to take, where on certain websites I need to go, that kind of stuff. This next one might not be suitable for your type of work, but you could also use your journal as a content planner. So whether that be video content, blog content, pictorial content, etc. For our next category, these are the ideas that I either thought of a bit later than writing the rest of this list, or they didn't really seem to fit anywhere else. So in our miscellaneous category, our first one is that of field notes. I love looking at field note journals. I think they end up looking so cool. And while I often consider field notes to be associated with nature, they don't necessarily have to be. On that train of thought though, you could also use your journal as a nature journal. So recording things about your surroundings, about your environment, and anything similar. Another thing that you could use your empty journal for is just random thoughts. So this could be feelings that you're having, questions that you're asking yourself. It might actually be pretty cool to have a journal just dedicated to questions that pop up, like in your day-to-day life. Another idea, and one that I also quite enjoy, is that of a list book. In this one, each page or spread is just a list of different things. If you've ever seen the top 10 lists that channels like Watch Mojo do, it's effectively a space for that, but for your own thoughts. These lists don't have to be ranked, and they can be about anything you want, but can be a fun thing to reflect on in the future. Our next two ideas are that of vision boards and mood boards. Mood boards are a great thing to use when you're planning out your journal layouts. So looking at the different materials you want to use and considering whether they actually fit in working towards the overall aesthetic you're aiming for. For vision boards, these are typically related to a goal or series of goals that you're trying to work on. So as a way to visualize yourself achieving those goals, which makes you more likely to actually do that. Our next idea is using your empty journal for long-term tracking. So that might be tracking just the one thing over a longer period of time, or it could be a series of things over a longer period of time. A good example of this is something like a year in pixels, which most people use to track their moods across the entire of a year. But if you're using a full journal for this, you might want to track more things or track for a longer period of time. While we flip back to write this page into my index, question of the day for you guys, what's an idea that I missed? And I know, of course, this list is not exhaustive. For instance, for 3 more ideas, you could dedicate the journal towards profiles of your friends, so thinking about their likes and dislikes, what's their favourite colour, what's their love language, just little bits and pieces of information that you could use when it comes to gift-giving seasons. You could use the journal for personality tests, so you could put in your Myers-Briggs test, you could put in your Enneagram, you could put in, I don't know, probably there's a BuzzFeed quiz about which type of bread are you. And you could use an empty notebook for generating different colour palettes, which is something I really enjoy doing. I'm very excited to read the suggestions that you guys leave in the comments, and hopefully you've found this video helpful. If you have, please do give it a big thumbs up, and be sure to subscribe to my channel for more on planning, productivity, and personal development. Until next time, bye!